Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have the trainer, a CIO of CIOs, right? Luis Taveras, right? A beautiful name, a beautiful gentleman who literally is the expert in helping you in your CIO journey, right? If you're a CIO and no matter where you are, if today's your first day becoming a CIO, or if this is your 20th year in it, I think you're going to find this podcast very interesting in the process. What we're all facing. And I think you're going to enjoy this. So, Luis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
As we start to look at, the idea of where CIOs are today compared to ever before, in the past, the CIO was kind of that, hey, that's the tech guy down at the end of the table over there, right? He was kind of second fiddle to the COO or CFO, all right, or COO. I mean, they were all, or CDO. They were all kind of a little bit further ahead than the tech guy at the end of the table.
Yeah, those days are long, long gone because there's very, very few parts of an organization that are not fully dependent on some kind of technology to really help them operate in the most efficient way possible. So the days in the healthcare sector, in the provider sector, in hospitals, uh, 15, 20 years ago, the CIO's office and the CIO, the IT department, used to be down in the basement, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
we're not there anymore, right? We're at the top. We're on the top floor, and everybody's absolutely dependent on us. So I used to joke with people that came for the first time to the hospital for IT visits. I said, make sure that if you're a little squeamish about dead people, don't get too far past it because next to us is always the morgue, right? So in the basement, but that's not the case anymore. We're
Well,
sitting at the top table.
I think that's true of all CIOs in the healthcare world.
Yeah.
Look, even the construction world, we can't operate today without having an information system that it has to be top of class by the speed by which we grow all the time. We need a CIO that is really developing those systems and processes that communicates faster, better, clear, because today's expectation is a way different than ever before.
It's much different because think about it. Back then we were building an email system, we
That's right.
were doing the back end processing of all these different systems, but now it's different. Now the solutions that we develop, the solutions that we put in place for the business, no matter what kind of business we're in, are enabling the business, not just supporting the business, and we're enablers of the business.
Well, my judgment is it is the business, right? I mean, technology is what the business is. If you're not operating on a digital basis, right? If your organization isn't run digitally, you're not going to be able to communicate to the rest of the world, right? It takes you out, and the infrastructure by which that happens takes a full time, takes lots of thought and creativity. I mean, as I look at the information systems that we have in a construction company, at one point we had 11 different major software packages. I'm not talking about the little ones in between the packages. We had 11 different major packages that communicated to different parts of the organization. And over the last 18 months, we have combined most of them into, we're down to two, right? And that wasn't something that, you could just do on the side. Well, I got a side project of eliminating some of these softwares. It literally took somebody who really looked at us, our needs, our wants, the architecture of the design of what we're doing, someone who could be forward thinking and understand where the marketplace and technologies are going. So it's a much different role than ever before.
So remember the way that these systems came to be. The finance department needed a system. They went out and got a finance system, right? The other department needed a system. They went out and got their own. That's how you ended up with 18 different applications, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't work today. Today you have to have what you said, two or three consolidated applications that really manage the entire organization because finance doesn't run independent of the rest of the organization anymore, right? It's all together. And that's why it's so critical to make sure that we have people that are thinking that way. We can't have all these silos across the organization anymore and think they're going to be effective. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, it just, first of all, that information, trips everybody up, right? We can show that when we had 9 11 different applications, the impact of of re-inputting information, the places we have data loss, places we have replication errors, all of that became, a place of uh, concern. And as we started to look at, all right, where are we going forward? What are we needing to, take a client from the time that we meet them, right, in the business development side, all the way through to, design development, structure and creation of our relationship with the client, all the way into operations as we worked with those clients, and then all the way on the back end of it as we started to finish and go into a long-term maintenance program with them. But all of that had to get structured. All aspects, the healthcare world, the financial world. You're seeing today those integrations between the systems that they operate the company on and the systems that they operate they support their clients with. Those are all have to be integrated in order for it to work.
Mhm. Yes.
So when we look at as we start to look at the different parts of it, especially in the healthcare world, the biggest clients that you work with is in the healthcare world. You guys have something that's it adds a whole nother level of complexity, right? You have kind of customer rights and customer all the stuff that we had to keep private, privacy acts. Those are all aspects that really make it even more and more daunting.
So we have lots and lots of regulations that we have to follow. Uh, we have an oath to make sure that we provide the best care to our patients and make sure that we don't harm our patients. So it is a different world where everything from the time the patient walks into one of our facilities, the time they leave, regardless of how they leave, everybody has to work together to provide the best care that we can to that patient and their families.
Yeah. So as we start to look at creating, if for the new CIO that's out there, and they're starting to look at, okay, look, I've now been tasked with this, and by the way, I'm probably not great at running. My judgment is CIOs aren't always the most politically savvy individual, right? Their technologies may be their goal, but so there's a little bit of coaching of how to stand in the boardroom, right? Where historically you've been shoved down the basement, right? Now you're expected to stand in the boardroom right side by side with the rest of the group. And as you start to develop the CIO, right? You've got a great book, The 90 Days CIO. It talks about some great stuff about just developing the human and their, the characteristics it takes to stand in that boardroom, right? How do you start to look at this? And you got to arm yourself with some great processes to start to be able to show the company, hey, I've got a system for how I'm going to do this. We're not just doing this haphazardly. When every time I read a new magazine, I'm not changing the company. I have a system for developing where we're going as a brand.
So the key is when you look for a CIO today, it's much different than the way you look for a CIO 20 years ago. You were looking for a technologist back then. Today, you're looking for a business leader, right? And that's
Mhm.
very different. So you're looking for a business leader that has that technology acumen and background with them. But it needs to be that you are highly effective, like you said, in communicating, in building relationships with all parts of the organization, and making sure that you absolutely belong in that boardroom with the top leadership of the organization. Again, much different than the technology person that we looked at a few years back. Because yes, we have to have the technology background, but we have to be general managers and leaders before we do that.
So as we start to develop, we find the right person, right? Like they're now in the role, and we start to develop my processes for growing technology for this organization. Really, what do we want to start to? Where do we start to organize first? What seems to be the right spot to really start developing?
So I think of that as a journey. And the first part of that journey is understanding where we are today. And what I find with most organizations today is that they're in what I call a reactive mode. In other words, you're just reacting to things that are happening on a day-to-day basis. You're keeping the lights on. You're making sure the systems are running and that they're not going down next week and the week after. So once you understand that reactive mode, you got to understand what the processes are that you need to get to the next stage, which is what I call operational excellence. To get
Well,
from the reactive stage to operational excellence, you have to make sure you have all the right processes, that you have all the right people in the right place, that you have invested in those people to train them so that they can do the best that they can and be very productive for the organization. And then the final stage is when you get to a high performance. So you're going to from a reactive to operational excellence to high performance. Reaching high performance is going to take a good 5 to 7 years, depending on where you are. But that's the pinnacle. That's what everything is really humming, and you're providing tremendous amount of value to the organization that you work with.
well, my judgment is a lot of CIO moves happen in one particular place, right? Something goes wrong, right? Rarely when things are going right do they change CIO. It's usually some. We had a big data breach. We had
Yeah.
a major
Mhm.
concern. Someone's head had to roll. Right now, you're been thrust into that role to go. Okay, we just had a massive change here. You're now going to walk into an organization that chopped off the last guy's head, and your job is to fix it and get from operation, from reactive mode. Now you got to do that transition to operational excellence, right?
Right.
And then to high performance, right? So there's this kind of transition. So you walk in and while you're in reactive mode, you start to look at, all right, where's the crisis? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to stop the bleeding right now?
So the first thing that I do, and this is really the first meeting that I have with the leadership in the IT organization, is that I share with them who I am, right? Because I need to start building that trust and building that teamwork. Without the team and the teamwork, you're going to get nowhere. So the first day that I'm there, I start building that trust with them. And the key to that is first showing them who I am and getting them to understand how I operate and what my leadership style is, right? Because I need them to open up to me too so I can understand who they are. You have to evaluate, do I have the right people on this team? And you don't have a whole lot of time to do that. You have to figure that out right up front. And part of that is building those relationships. And again, I start by letting them know who I am and how I operate because I don't want to be any confusion when they see me do something. Is that out of character or in character? No, I am who I am and he is who I am. And that's what I make sure they understand.
So now you walk in, you kind of set, hey, this is the role. I'm going to be the spearhead on what's going on. Now there, my guess is there's always going to be some short term need, right? You walk in, there's a gushing hole somewhere, right?
Yep.
We've got a data breach, we've got a systematic error, something shut down, we've got malware that took over our system. Somewhere we've had a massive interruption in the ability to serve our internal customers or our external customers, right? And I've got to go in and do some sort of major, massive repair to make that happen.
Yeah, so whatever the issue is that caused the change in CIO, obviously that's the first thing that you have to correct. And in many cases, they've already started dealing with that, right? And what you have to do is to make sure the action plans that they're taking, and there is a plan to do something, that you actually review that and say, yes, I'm okay with going with that plan, or no, here's the expertise that I bring to the table, and here's how we're going to change that plan. So again, you have to exercise your knowledge and let them know that I mean, you have to prove to them that you really belong in that role. A lot of people, when you start, are going to question, is this the right person, right? Yeah, they went through a process, but did they pick the right person? How many times do we see that a CIO comes into a role and 6 months, a year later, they're gone, right? So we can't trust that the process is always right. And people will always be questioning, is this the right person? So you have to establish yourself right from the beginning, because again, building that level of trust is absolutely critical right from the beginning.
Well, and then once you start that relationship with all the other players, all the other stakeholders, now you're creating a communication path for them through you. Right now, you start to really dive in, and my guess is, all right, now I'm putting out the bleeding, right? I'm stopping the bleeding, and I'm communicating to each and every one of them exactly what's happening and what we're doing now and where we're heading next, right? So everybody in the team knows where they are. My judgment is when you're in crisis and we don't give them answers, right? They make them up. Oh, he just,
That's right.
he's not there. Nothing's happened. Oh, it's going to be the same next week.
Mhm.
They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They get desperate. They start communicating that way. They may even go backwards, right? How many times have some program that got started, maybe something went wrong, but it was just a second away from getting right. Just it had a little error, and all of a sudden now we've given up on the whole system and gone backwards. We've gone backwards 10 steps.
Yeah, and so when you look at the book, the major part of the book is making sure that you're addressing where you are today, but then show that strategic mind that you bring to the table in building that plan, the strategic plan within that first 90 days that you're there. Because yes, you're building credibility, you're building partnership, but you got to show them how strategic you are because that's what you're there for. Right?
And I think you got to be really careful at this point right here, not to make snap judgments just to please people. This is where real rigor and attention have got to be the standard, right? We don't want to have as a double mess up, right? We want to make sure that the next step we take, people can see that this is actually going to be effective. And sometimes, there's this propensity or desire for someone to make a quick result or make it too quick. Your book really talks about making sure that slowing down a little bit and really understanding what you're doing and making sure that next step you're taking is well thought out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about planning, right? You need to make sure that you have a plan and you're executing that plan. That keeps you from reacting, because the last thing that I want to do is react. Every time that I react to something, I end up either regretting something that I said or something that I do. Versus when I do something according to a plan, I feel much, much better about the results that I'm going to get.
Well, and I think you got to go back to no matter where they are as a company, and you've now stepped into this role, that you're now executing on high level processes, right? You start that behavior from your first interactions, right? You don't walk in and start making decisions on a snap, right? We have a process that's we're following very effective IT practices.
And these are IT practices that have been developed over the last 50, 75 years. So this is not something that is just coming out in the last year or two. And that's key. People often tell me, so where's your AI plan? What are you doing with cloud? And I hear people say, hey, you got to run to the cloud. Well, no, no, no. I'm not going to run to the cloud. I'm going to build a plan on how I'm going to go to the cloud so that it's effective and it brings the value that we expect from the organization. When you run and you get caught up in the latest technology and the hype that's out there, you're just reacting again, right? That's
Yeah.
not the way to do it. That's not the way to show that you're the leader of this organization when it comes to IT and the entire business.
Well, and I think you have to make a plan that communicates to not just where the crisis is in the current process, right? I'm not communicating to just the red alert section. Hey, what are the data loss or whatever the problem is? That I'm communicating and creating systems that will fulfill all of the company's needs. So whatever the fix I'm doing, all of the company can see. All the department heads can see that what we're doing is going to really be effective across the entire the entire brand, and they get some input and they can see their input becomes part of that, and their needs are going to be met, so they're not feeling left out. Like, hey, you went and solved patient intake, or you went and solved one portion of the company, but you forgot our department.
Yeah, and again, that's why you have to have that view from the top, because your actions are going to be across the organization. I can't just solve a problem for the lab department if it's going to impact the other parts of the business, right? The parts of the organization. So I'm looking at it from the top and making sure the decisions that I'm making and the solutions that I'm implementing have the biggest value across the organization. And at times, you may have a great solution for a single department,
That's
but it
right.
doesn't fit with the entire organization and the
Right.
strategy. And you have to tell them, I'm sorry, I understand how critical and great this is for you, but it doesn't work for the entire organization. We're going to have to not prioritize that. Right?
Yeah,
That's
well,
not an easy message to some people, but
it's
it's a
tough,
message
Greg,
that
because
you have to give.
right,
You know?
that's the big role that you're filling. I mean, that's what's amazing about the book. It really does give you, and again, I just wanted the audience. I'm not sure if I said it. It's the book is the 90-day CIO. Right, it's a great book. It's a great read. It's like the instruction manual. It's the instruction manual for this transformation, really helping you. And even if you're already a great CIO, look, I do great. The stuff that Luis talks about, it really does bring you back to some great practices. I feel like, no one can ever say that going back to great fundamental practices isn't what I should always be doing, right? Going back to my fundamentals, and you've got some great fundamentals in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I get him through, and I'm really starting to build on. I'm getting us out of crisis. Now I'm working on creating the next level of the next level of development. And now I want to really start to look at. All right, I'm out of crisis. I'm starting to look forward thinking, but really my ultimate goal is high performance, right? Not just I don't want to be just getting by, right? Because the problem is just getting by is already old,
Mhm.
right? I
So,
got to be thinking, where are we going? Where's it going? I'm not. It's like the old Wayne Gretzky. When Wayne used to say, "I'm not the fastest skater, but I'm not skating to where the puck is. I'm skating to where the puck's going."
yeah, and that's key because in the book I do talk about the Pareto principle, which most people know as the 80-20 rule, right? We hear the 80-20 rule applied all over the place, but the 80-20 rule to me is today 80+% of what we do in the IT organization is just keeping the lights on. It's just keeping the engine running. It's keeping the organization doing what they normally do. And what we want to focus on is over that next 5 years, when we get from reactive to high performance, we need to flip that around. 80% of what we do has to be bringing value to the organization, and 20% of the time we spend keeping the lights on. That's the strategic thinking that we have to get to, and that's the equation that we have to really flip.
And I think that's where your insight in the business is so valuable, right? When you start to know that, look, we're not just trying to solve emails anymore. We're not even trying to do patient intake anymore. We're really starting to build a system that's way more robust than ever before. Today's healthcare, today's clients in all aspects are way more educated than ever before. You don't walk into any bit. You're not walking into a construction company. You're not walking into a tire repair shop. You're not walking into a healthcare world. That customer is way higher educated than before. So we're expected to operate at a much different level and give them answers at a much higher level than ever before.
It's a whole different interaction. How many people walk into the doctor's office today haven't already spent an hour online researching what they may be suffering from? Who did that 20, 30 years ago? So that patient physician interaction is completely different. Like you said, it's not just in healthcare. Everywhere you go, you already done some research before you go to have that encounter.
Well, hold on. You got to be because guys like me, I walk in. I've already predetermined. I've got this little itch I have on my side. It's cancer. I come walking in. I'm panicking. My wife always laughs. She's like, "Dude, you're a little dramatic." I'm like, "Well, look, my whole thing is I don't want to die from something inside, right? So I am maybe a little bit more of a worrier." But so as soon as something happens, I'm looking it up on the internet. I'm hunting it down. I can walk into my doctor's office. And she's like, "Look, let me make. I'm going to work on this here. Don't worry. We're not going to leave you. We're not going. You're not dying, Anthony." But there's a little bit of that panic, and today there's so much more information coming at everybody than ever before.
Yeah, so you're right. You're one of those that thinks that you can self-diagnose no matter what the problem is, right? Uh,
For sure,
and
I am.
yeah, and a lot of what that first encounter is calming you down and going through that evidence-based process of identifying what it is that you're suffering from, doing the right test, and then preparing a plan to help you to get much better. But a lot of people don't realize, like you said, they go through and they go on the internet and they investigate so many different areas, and it's not always right, right? You don't always have all the information because you're going based on what you think. That's only one part. So the subjective part is what you're going on, right? What the doctor's going to go on is the objective part. What do the lab results say? What is the MRI showing? Right? But you don't have that knowledge, so you do start to panic because you're making a
Right.
decision,
And
coming to a
believe me,
conclusion without the information.
when I don't have an answer, I pull from some. My friend, my friend passed away, last year from something, and I put that idea in there, and so that's what doctors are facing. So today, I want to kind of dive right back into, as you're looking at your role in the CIO role, and you start to create, maybe you might call it your system for governance, right? The system that really creates how I'm going to operate this entire team, that how it will address the organization, right? As I start to look at how do I set up my, maybe call it our governance. I think you reference that in the book.
So the governance, when you put together a strategic plan in that 90 days, the governance is absolutely the most critical part, because that's going to let people know how they're going to engage your organization and how you're going to provide to them what they need. So the governance model is a very disciplined approach of making sure that we understand what the organization needs and how we're going to provide that solution. A lot of times people say, hey, this is what I need. And we have a knee-jerk reaction, say, here's what your solution is. No, that's not going to work. That doesn't work this day and age. So we have to make sure that we have a process for an intake process, and then we have a governance model that evaluates what that request is, and then puts it to a process of evaluation, and at the end you come up with a solution. In my case, especially in healthcare, I make sure that I have two committees that are a big part of that governance model. One is a clinical steering committee, which is a lot of members of the medical staff and other people that are on the clinical side, and the other side is a business steering committee. If you're asking for a business solution, we're going to help you develop a business case that's going to take you through and have you come to the business steering committee and present it to them and let them say yes or no. Not me, right? I'm here to do what they really decide with my guidance, obviously. But it needs to be that the people that really know what is required, they're the ones making that decision. If they say yes to that, then we go to the next level, which is an executive steering committee. And if they say yes, then it becomes a project. And then we begin to implement that. But that's a big part of that government. It's a very disciplined approach to make an investment in information technology solutions. In the old days, remember we're talking about the old days? We
Yeah.
Everybody thought we're spending a lot of money in IT. We're just putting money into IT. I don't want people to think that way anymore. They're investing. They're investing in IT solutions for the organization,
But
and that's the
ultimately,
key.
you're looking for the optimal outcome. You really add value for the company, right? Your this investment is going to look. Nobody likes change. I mean, like for Christ's sakes, when the iPhone, every time I get an update, I'm like, Jesus, I just figured it out, and they move my buttons around, and something else happens, and I'm like, okay, I have to go find some human kid to change, right? And my judgment is that's what happens with organizations. A lot of these companies have been around for a while, especially big organizations, and changing is frustrating. Look, I mean, I laugh with my last doctor. He was a dinosaur, right? He started when there was no computers in the world. And throughout his career, he's had computers, and he fought it and fought it and fought it. And then I remember about 10 years ago when he couldn't fight it anymore, right? I remember the first time he put laptops in his. I remember I walked in, it went from paper charts, and he carried his little paper chart around, to a actual laptop in every one of the rooms. And I thought to myself, he looked pained to make that step, right? He was like, he had been around for a long time, and he's this great guy. Great, I had been for 20 years, and but taking that step for him was tough, right? He had to learn codes and learn how to type stuff in, and he used to write a couple of hand notes down, throw it to someone at the front desk. They used to process all of it for him, right? Now all of a sudden he's got to do that in a much different way.
And when you think of that doctor, right? The worst thing that we could do is to say, here, use this laptop, and this is what you're going to use to now document everything that you do for your patients. That doesn't work. The key is working with that doctor from the first time that the idea comes up and keeping him engaged in this process so that he doesn't feel like we're doing this to him, which is probably how he felt. We're
That's
doing
right.
this with him. And that's a
And
critical
for him,
component. Yeah. And
right?
for him to make him better. But so because that makes that change a lot easier. You mentioned before, change is very difficult. And we need to make sure that we facilitate that change, and that's through communications and engagement. We can't just go to people and say, here's your solution. It doesn't work that way anymore. People have to be engaged in the process and feel like they're a big part of the changes that we're making, not just having things done to them, because that's how
Yeah.
the frustration comes.
Well, not just like, oh, here's another corporate bullshit, excuse me, another corporate BS thing. Right now, I got another corporate thing coming down, another mandate. I got to do some paperwork.
Yeah.
They've got to see that ultimately it's making their life easier and it's adding value. And hey, by the way, once I get this figured out, oh, look at that. I've got access to all the records. I've got easy way to billing. The prescriptions get filled in moments rather than, I could shoot it right to the pharmacy. There's all kinds of great benefits that come out of it that may have been a little, it might take a lot longer before. And once they start to see that this is actually happening for me rather than to me, my judgment is that they become a lot more committed to supporting you in that development.
And they absolutely see the benefits and feel the benefits. You just tell them about the benefits, right? It's much different when they see the benefits and they understand what it's going to do for them. One thing that you got to be careful with is that you don't say, "Well, guess what? In 6 months, a year from now, things are going to be so much better for you." Well, no, you're causing me all this pain now. I can't wait 6 months from now. So it has to be immediate benefits that people see, and that happens again when you communicate, when you're engaging with them.
So we start to look at guiding principles, right? As I create an IT department and I start to set up these guiding, these kind of core values, these guiding principles, and start to really look at, all right, what are some of the core values I want to, establish as a team? And by the way, you talk about a bunch of them in your book, so I'm not sure we'll go to all of them, but I want to really look at some of our main core values that me as an IT, as CIO, I want to make sure that these are what I'm striving for, right? These are my core values.
So the guiding principles are absolutely critical because you embark on a 5, 7 year journey. And if you don't have any guideposts, if you don't have these guiding principles, you can go all different ways, but these will keep you in focus and will keep you on track towards that journey. Major guiding principles. Principle number one is that you're doing this for the entire organization. Solutions that you provide are being provided with an organizational view, not a departmental view, not a single person view. We know there's people that want to drive their own solution, right? No, this is for the entire organization. The other big guiding principle is that anything that we do is going to be delivered on time, is going to be delivered on budget, and it's going to be delivered in a superior quality manner. So those are absolutely critical guiding principles that we have to have. The other part is very engaging. Mm. The decision that I make is not as good as the decision that you and I will make if we
That's right.
work on it together. And it's at the one that you and I will make is definitely not as good as if we have 5 other people that know what they're talking about that we engage in doing this. It's a very collaborative process, very engaging process, and lots of communication as we go through. Remember, you're changing a culture, right? And you have
Well,
to be careful how you do that.
if you don't engage them, they will. I've done process development with multiple organizations, and if you don't engage them, it just becomes another thing they're not going to get right. Another thing I have to do. I can't see any value in this, right? And again, it happens to them, not for them. And all of a sudden, when I lose their engagement, right? When I lose their interest, when they start to be the naysayers of the new process, I'm already failed, right? I've
Yeah.
already, it's going to make it that much harder of a hill to climb. They become the lead weight on the system, as opposed to when they're feel part of, they become part of our cheerleaders, the people that spear on everybody else, that help us, because implementing a new process, new IT programs, new any processes, takes a big step.
So two key words, right? Teamwork and partnership. You have to build those.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You talk about a 5 or 10 year strategy. Now, look, with technologies changing so fast, right? How does that work? I mean, that's the one that when I read through this, I'm like, all right, how am I looking? How am I creating in a world that's changing every? I mean, look, at the beginning of this year, very few people knew about AI, right?
Mhm.
We're in 20, but if you're listening to this is 2023, right? We're at the end of 2023. And, at the beginning of this year, maybe a little bit in November, December of the year before, right? Maybe 12 months ago, right about now, people started talking about AI. But certainly in every conversation today, it's AI driven, AI technology, and if your knee jerk reaction is to jump, I need to jump in this. You're not. You got to stay real steady to make sure we stay with our core values before you make a jump. But how do you plan a 5-year plan when the environment changes so fast?
So you have that 5-year plan, and again, it's going to keep you from reacting to the latest hype, which in this case is AI right now, and we'll see where that goes. But in my example, I'm not going to jump on all these AI solutions just because that's the buzzword and the hype of the day. So when you have that 5-year plan, a part of that 5-year plan is what I call the annual work plan. So every year you update that part of that's called the annual workday plan, but it fits into your 5-year plan. I mean, it's the plan, right? So it has to be flexible. You can adjust that plan, but your overall vision stays within that 5-year horizon. And then you adjust as things happen on an annual basis. And then you create that annual work plan portion of it.
Well, and you talk a lot about partnerships with the vendors that you pick.
Yes.
Is part of the strategy when you're picking vendors, are you looking for those vendors that will help guide you through some of these experiences, some of this technology muck that we have to wade through?
So to accomplish that journey to go from reactive all the way to high performance, we need everybody on board. And there's no question that there's not an organization out there that doesn't depend on outside organizations. And I classify them in two ways. One is vendors that you referred to, and that's a very different relationship than partners. So
Right.
I make the
Give-
distinction because the vendors are transactional. They're helping you do something today. Your partners are the ones that you really, really depend to make that journey to be successful. So I have probably three, 400 vendors, but I have 12 partners that really are a major core of who I depend on to get us where we have to get.
And how do you pick that? How do you make that distinction? How do you go from being a vendor to a partner?
So that the what people think is that a financial one. I spend $12 million with Microsoft, therefore Microsoft is my partner. No, no, no. That's transactional. Microsoft is my partner because most of the solutions that 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 we have depend on Microsoft. So it's really that strategic relationship that we have with them. It may not be more than $1 million relationship, but they're absolutely critical for you to meet your strategy and to go where you're planning on going. So that's a big relationship to distinguish between a vendor and a partner.
Nice. And you start to bring them on. You start to create those partnership relationships as opposed to the vendor relationships. And I think it's key. Look, I've said it all along. One man, in today's environment, it's all about building partnerships, right? The days of I'm doing this on my own. I own that customer. I own that process. I own those. I'm gonna build this all internally. We just can't afford to do that anymore.
Absolutely not. And so who are the partners? One way to distinguish them is who do you have that trust-based relationship with, right? Versus that transactional relationship with. And you know the difference. I
Yeah.
mean, you know who you're dealing with, and you know who you can count on to say, guess what? I really need some help. Get somebody here now. And you know that you're going to call them and they're going to come and help you right now. Versus, oh no, you got to do this, you got to do that. We don't have the people right now. We'll get back to you tomorrow. That doesn't work. Right? In today's world, that absolutely doesn't work. But those that step up are the ones that are your partners. The one that say to you, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to help you, but you're going to have to pay me another $100,000 for that." That's not your partner, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They sometimes I look at my partnerships with the company. I'm like, look, if you do this right, you want me to do that work, you want me to take that on. Here's why I might not need to charge you more for that, but I might need to structure things a little bit better so that look, we lessen the crises. We don't you're not jerking my chain. That you hey look, I'm internal to you so that I'm watching stuff far enough in advance that I'm not the brands that we work with the best, they bring us in on everything, right? I'm watching real estate deals happen. I'm watching, where as opposed to some of the brands where we're just a vendor, I find out a week before a project starts, it's dying. I'm not internal to the brand. I'm not meeting with their real estate people. So, I can't call the real estate guy up and go, or gal up and go, hey, what's going on with this deal? And they can say, hey, look, we're stuck. There's an issue with the lease or the buy or whatever we're doing here. I can't quite go close on this for you yet. So maybe it's a 50-50 that we're going to start on time. And then that's partnership, right? As opposed to the brands who use me, abuse me, like, hey, it moves. So what? If you want the project, you have to take it. Where they kind of use me in some regards. So I think I love when you talk about really creating those partnerships where we can go and serve each other very, very well. Now let's talk a little bit. So I've got my system set up, right? I'm forward thinking, right? I start to create processes. I process stuff. How do you, you know, I don't want to, how do you keep the processes in place? What am I doing to track and manage that? How do you set that up so that everybody knows the process and the system that we're using, the library of technology that we have?
So when you think about all the solutions that we have, uh, first of all, remember, we're not going to have 1,000 different solutions because we're going to go through a rationalization process, going to say these are the 20, 30. In your case, you went from 18 to 3, right? So now you have these 3 anchor solutions. What you really have to do is to make sure that you create what I call these placemats. And a placemat gives you all the features and functions, all the different modules of that solution. And you have to communicate that with everybody because they need to know what we have so that they don't go out searching and looking for different solutions when we already have something. And by the way, if they go out and they search for a solution and they come to us for approval through that governance process that we talked about before, my first question is, did you look at what we already have?
Yeah,
Right.
right, right. I mean,
And many times they say, "Oh, I didn't know what we had that," right?
well, it's always the new guy that comes in. I love, we have new people enter a system, and all of a sudden it's usually in a spot where we're not following process properly, or we're not doing something well, and they walk in, they go, well, we're here to fix it, and look, they're meaning well, right? They're coming in to do something, but the problem that was created by what they're trying to fix was something we already had in place that we just weren't following or using or managing something properly. And my want is to one, make sure that we're using things before things become a crisis and someone thinks they need to fix it. And two, as those people have requests and ideas, we can point them in the direction of the team that's already established that. And we can see if there's something we already have existing or something we can modify slightly to support those needs. So we're not recreating the wheel or wasting time hunting things down that, someone just spent 20 hours hunting down a resource. And then all of a sudden you find out it literally was on a drive somewhere that we could pull that for you in a couple of hours.
So one thing that I've experienced is people come up and say, "Here's what I need. Here's the solution that I need. And it's a better one than what we have." But that's because they evaluate what we had 3, 4 years ago. They don't know what we have today. So when I show them what we have today, they say, "Oh man, that's exactly what I need, and it's already here." Right? So, but it's that engagement, that communication that's absolutely critical. And people have to realize that they can't just go out and buy these solutions that they used to do before, because they used to go out and buy a server, right? At that time, it wasn't called, it was just called a computer, and they would put it under somebody's desk or put it in the closet in their department, and they ran that. So we ended up with all these shadows IT organizations all over the place. Not today. You can't do that because we act as an organization throughout, and all departments are interconnected. So those shadow organizations have to absolutely disappear, and I think they have for the most part.
Well, and I want to talk about, so kind of this brings up some great stuff, because when those organizations, that type of stuff happened, what it ultimately does is create risk, right?
Yeah.
When we don't
Mhm.
operate as one, right? If I look at a battlefield, if we don't operate as one core group and we have one battle plan that we all are executing on, right? If you go off and do your battle plan, you go off and do your battle plan, what ultimately that creates is risk. In today's world, we're being attacked. I mean, cybersecurity has never been more vulnerable, right? I mean, the attackers are smarter than ever before. They really are, um, you know, way more sophisticated than I've ever seen. The stuff that they're doing, on every level of every organization. It's tough. How do you go out and stress test your systems and find that? I mean, how do you stress test the organization? Are you looking for those? What are you doing to really to mitigate potential future big impacts?
So cybersecurity that you mentioned is a constant battle for us. The team just sits there in a command center and looks at all these attacks that we have on a continuous basis. We're looking at a million or so attacks a day, which people don't realize that.
A million a day. I mean,
Absolutely, easily a million a day. And
wow.
guess what? That's going to get more and more because now you're going to have all these bad people out there that are very smart, and they're going to start using artificial intelligence to get even smarter and create all these attacks against us. So, how do we do that? It's a major effort, a major focus of the organization. And it really starts with every person in the organization understand that they are our first line of defense. They're our firewall. Most of these attacks come through phishing emails. 80, 90% come through phishing email. I need to spend a lot of time educating them. How do you identify that it's a phishing email? And please
It's
don't click on
hard.
that email.
It's hard.
It's
Look.
really difficult. Yeah.
So I was yesterday, right? I've got a great, the relationship I have with Chase Bank. A VP sent me an email yesterday, and it was like this thing. He sent me this like special little link. I had to push on a button to get his, kind of encrypted message. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not hitting the button. I could not tell. I called him. I got on the phone. I haven't got a cell phone number, luckily. I'm like, hey, Nick, was this from you? He goes, yeah, just you click on the button. He goes, that's where I sent it to you. I go, look, I don't trust. I mean, look, I don't know. How do I know that's you and not some cyber, security guy? We've had it happen before. I've literally had, we just got attacked. We lost 44 grand on a deal where, just they caught us in between emails. They captured an email from somebody. They went in and changed the email, sent the same email, just changed the banking accounts on a pay application, and it was so incredibly smart. I thought to
They're
myself,
getting smarter, they're getting more sophisticated. They're using technology and using social engineering so that they can search everything, and they learn exactly how you write an email.
that's right.
They learn exactly what your phraseology is, and they use that so the person that receive it can't tell that it's not coming from you. Now, we used to be able to say, look for misspelling
Yeah.
because these are foreign entities and they don't know how to spell. Well, guess what? With artificial intelligence, you don't have to know how to spell anymore.
Yeah, no, that last attack we got 44 800 got lost, and if you looked at it, I literally sat there for a second going, I was impressed. I was like, holy cow, this is it's a whole new level, and now I know how bad it can be. And your book talks a lot about that. Look, Doc, I really wanted the audience to know, look, go pick this book up. If you're in charge, if you're a CIO, even if you're not, if you're going to hire a CIO, right? This is the book that you need to know. How am I going to communicate the role that I'm looking for? This book, it's an easy read. I read it really, really quickly. But it has so much great insight as to how to approach your technology systems, right? The book really does spell out. It's available on Amazon. It takes a couple seconds to buy. Guys, do that now, right? Take a second, and it like you'll read in a weekend. It was not a hard read to go through. And Luis, your systems make it really easy for me to apply to the companies that I run.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me and having this discussion. My intention with the book was really to share everything that I learned the last 40 years in the technology world and the last 20 plus years as a CIO. My focus is really to make sure that I pass this information forward. I think I also want to make sure that I share with your audience here that all proceeds from this book are going to charity. I'm not getting a penny from this book. I'm passing that all along to charity.
That's beautiful, right? Donating that to charity is a big deal. Look, if people want to get a hold of you and they want to have you come in and speak to their organization and bring, some insight into this, what's the best ways for them to catch up with you?
So there's a in the back cover of the book, there's some information there how to get in touch with me. I wanted to make sure that I added that in there because again, my goal is to share. And if I can share like the opportunity you've given me here, also going to speak to organizations, I'm much, much happy to do that.
And we'll put that all down below in the down in the show notes. Look, audience, as always, if you liked what you heard, look, you're having great guests. Just take a second, like and subscribe right now. It means the world to myself and the team in the background, and to Luis, and it makes sure that you hit that little red bell so that you make sure you get all the latest and greatest. And as always, we're so grateful for you listening. Thanks for being here.